Hi, my name's Nicole and I write rural suspense for Allen and Unwin. I've been writing full-time for about 8 years now and I've been published with Allen and Unwin for the past 5. Yeah, I have a few questions to answer and so I thought we'd get into it. So the first question is, what made me want to be a writer? Well, I was surrounded by books when I was little. I think I've always been obsessed with them. It started off when my mother gave me fairy tale books and myths and legends, and it sort of snowballed from there. I was always an avid reader, and I just love everything about reading. The stories, the way the book feels in one's hand, how you can get lost within the pages. It's just a marvellous feeling, and one that has helped me over several difficult situations in my life over the years. When things are going bad, you can always lose yourself into a good book. One of the earliest books that stuck with me, I suppose, when I was a child was Tom's Midnight Garden by Philippa Pierce, I think. And it's a marvellous children's fantasy that was had a dual timeline of what was happening and what happened in the past and how it converges all in one house. And I think not only did that sweep me away and get my imagination going as a child, it also, it's probably the reason why I'm so obsessed, I think is the word, with multiple or dual timelines within stories. I find it with my own writing, I use them quite often, and yeah, I mean, they give a more depth to a story, I think, and it gives you a better perspective of what has gone on and what is going on and why characters are acting as they do. When I actually started thinking about writing and trying to get published, I think I was in my late 20s, and I tried a few stories that will never, ever, 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 ever see the light of day. And they were, of course, rejected, rightfully so, might I add. But because of that, I really lost confidence in myself, and I didn't start writing again for years and years and years. In fact, it was more like 9 years ago. I thought, well, if I ever want to pursue this dream of writing and telling stories and things like that, I really have to give it a shot, and it's sort of like now or never. So that's what I did. And 8 years ago, I got my first publishing contract with a very small press, and then 5 years ago, I started writing rural romance or rural suspense with Allen and Unwin. So, moral of the story is, if you are thinking about writing, don't do what I did, okay? It's not a good thing. Don't do what I did. Keep writing, have confidence in yourself, and don't give up, okay? Even if you get hit around a bit and rejected, just keep going, because you can do this. You can. So that's my advice for all of those of you out there that want to be authors. Okay, the next question I have is, why do I write rural suspense? Well, I think one of the main reasons is because I actually live, I've grown up and now still live in a rural town and in central Victoria. And it's pretty easy to be inspired by the town itself and the landscape around it. You know, we've got bush and the history too. So even though I write fictional stories and I write fictional towns, there's a base of, yeah, they're based in what I know. So, you know, that's probably why. I've always liked cozy mysteries, and to combine that element of suspense or mystery within an Australian landscape, I always think is interesting, and yeah, I just love doing it. Okay, the next question was research. How do I go about it? Do I have any strategies? I don't think I have any strategies, but there we go. So here we are. It depends on the book, and it can vary greatly between them. So I might find myself climbing through fences and wandering through sheep sheds, and taking pictures of, bush and abandoned mines and things like that. Another thing I do sometimes is go to the local historic societies, particularly if there's an aspect of a town or something. Like with my latest book, The Macalester Legacy, there is a timeline from 1906 running through it. And of course, the town of Harlington is fictional, but I wanted to base it in some facts. So yeah, I've been looking at the gold rush and the just what was happening around from the 1850s onwards in this general area. So I've incorporated that into the book somewhat. The other thing too, growing up in a country town, I guess it's very different than living in the city. I've done that too, but I sort of came back. A lot of us do. Grow up, go away, and it sort of draws you back always. And I think part of it is that there's a slower pace. It's not a bad thing, but it's a different feel in the country than like in Melbourne or somewhere like that. Even though a lot of us live in town, we have like the bush all around us, big skies and endless paddocks, and it's really it sort of seeps into you, and I think that's part of it when writing rural stories. That part of me is there, and it's very easy to tap into. Yeah, so the other thing too is growing up in a small town. There's always a town history. There's always tall stories and a little gossip, and these things bring flavour and ideas. And so even though my stories are fictional, I have to admit that sometimes I do draw upon histories, gossip, and things like that from my local town. And I have another question, which is, do I always know how the book's going to end? Well, the answer is yes, I do. I find that I have to plot my book from beginning to end before I even start writing it. So I do a story run, as I call it. And yes, my dog's barking, sorry. I do a story run, which is basically a synopsis, a really rough synopsis from the beginning right to the end. And I can't start writing the first chapter until that's done, because I have to know where I'm going. Some other authors and some of my friends can just start writing and they just keep going and see where the story takes them. But for me, I need a map to follow. Things can change within the story itself, but I need a vague map to sort of follow to see where I'm going, because otherwise I'll get stuck and lost and everything will fall into a big hole like a mine shaft. So that's what happens. Okay, and then the last thing is to talk a little bit about Macalester Legacy, which I'm now going to dive over here and get. Whoop. Okay, so here is the Macalester Legacy, probably backwards, but there you go. It's my 6th book with Allen and Unwin, and it tells the story of Berry Macalester, who finally returns to her hometown of Harlington after many years. As a child, her family was torn apart by a terrible tragedy, and now she's back. She's only here to sell off the old farmhouse and finally put the entire past behind her so she can move on. However, the longer she's in town, the more she begins to question the past and what really happened to her family on that terrible day of her 10th birthday. So yeah, so we have a mystery of what happened, and will Berry actually find the truth? There's several themes that run through the book. Some of them include grief and loss and trying to find the strength to get to the other side of it, some sort of path that you can make your way through. The other thing was friendships and how strong they can be, and also how when you least expect it, sometimes you find that significant connection even when you weren't looking for it. So these are the sort of things that I was thinking about whilst writing it. So I hope you'll give the Macalester Legacy a whirl, and thanks so much for hanging out with me. See you later. Bye.